Welcome to Berktown. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into a role that is, well, absolutely critical for public safety, yet often goes unacknowledged for its immense complexity: the public safety dispatcher. When you think of calling 911, you might picture someone calmly answering and sending help. Pretty straightforward, right? But what we're going to unpack today reveals just how profound, demanding, and multifaceted that initial point of contact truly is. These are the unseen heroes, formally recognized now as the first responders.
That's exactly right. And we've gathered an incredible amount of detail from some really comprehensive sources. Things like the California Public Safety Dispatcher Training Curriculum and the Post-Public Safety Dispatcher Basic Course Outline from San Bernardino County. These documents really lay bare the rigorous, the comprehensive training framework that molds these individuals. It's not just about taking calls. It's way beyond that. It's about a deeply integrated understanding of law, technology, communication, human psychology, all under immense moment-to-moment pressure.
Right. So our mission today is to give you a shortcut, essentially, to truly understanding what it means to be a public safety dispatcher. You're going to gain some surprising insights and perhaps a whole new appreciation for that calm, skilled voice on the other end of an emergency call. So let's unpack this. Okay, let's start at the very beginning. The role itself, public safety dispatcher, it's evolved dramatically. Our sources highlight this key designation. Under Assembly Bill 1945, they are now formally recognized as the first responder. So what does that truly signify? I mean, beyond just a title.
Well, it's definitely more than just a title. It really underscores the critical nature of their work as the absolute initial point of contact in any emergency. Their actions, or even their inactions, can have immediate and really profound consequences. The training instills this deep moral commitment to maintaining public trust, precisely because they are that first lifeline.
Okay, so this moral commitment,
Yeah.
how does that translate into their day-to-day responsibilities? What does it look like in practice?
Well, they are the very first point of public safety contact, period. They're responsible for the initial allocation of critical resources: police, fire, medical. And they serve as this crucial liaison between the public calling in distress and the units responding in the field. And beyond just the typical 911 calls, these communication centers handle a whole range of non-traditional functions too: information, coordination between agencies.
Yeah.
It raises a key point. How do they maintain such an incredibly high degree of professionalism and ethics in what is always a high-stakes environment?
Yeah, and you mentioned conduct. The sources talk about the impact of conduct, things like avoiding a hostile work environment, sexual harassment, dealing with tough ethical dilemmas. How do they cultivate that intense community service attitude?
The curriculum focuses really intensely on developing a strong professional demeanor and ethical behavior. It's about integrating personal values with the agency's values. This means understanding and meeting the expectations of multiple communities. You've got the citizens calling for help, the officers and other field personnel they support, and their own colleagues in the center. They learn the entire workflow within a communication center, from how calls even originate, common incidents they'll face, through evaluation, routing calls, the different response types, and the absolutely crucial documentation that underpins every single action.
It sounds like a massive amount of responsibility right from the get-go. What about long-term? Is dispatching just sort of a static job, or are there career paths?
Oh, not at all. The training actually outlines a really wide array of career development opportunities. You can specialize, become a tactical dispatcher, feeding real-time intelligence during high-risk situations, or a hostage negotiator. Many go on to become communications training officers, CTOs, who train the new recruits, or even serve as peer counselors, offering that vital support to colleagues dealing with the stress. There are significant instructional opportunities, leadership development paths. It really shows the depth and potential for growth within the field. It's a real career.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Dispatchers aren't just, taking down notes. They have to understand the legal ramifications of every detail and how they fit into the bigger picture, the criminal justice system. Can you break down their role in that complex web?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a crucial point. They need a solid understanding of the entire court system, local, state, federal. Plus, the functions of law enforcement, corrections, jails, prisons, parole, probation. Their role isn't just being the first point of contact. Remarkably, they're often involved in courtroom preparation and can even be called to testify.
Wait, courtroom testimony. So their immediate actions, the notes they take, the way they handle a call, that literally impacts the outcome of a legal case.
Precisely. Their contribution to the timely, effective investigation and resolution of a criminal case is absolutely vital. And this really highlights the grave consequences of any errors, omissions, negligence, or even just incomplete information gathering. It underscores the absolute necessity of thorough, meticulous documentation techniques. Every call, every note, every radio transmission, it could all become part of a legal proceeding down the line.
Wow. So they need a pretty robust understanding of the law itself then. What specific legal concepts are crucial for them to grasp, like instantly on a call?
They learn the core definition of a crime. An act committed or omitted in violation of a law with a punishment attached. They have to instantly differentiate classifications. Is it an infraction, a misdemeanor, a felony, even something called a wobbler, which is fascinating. It can be an elective felony or a misdemeanor, depending on the circumstances or how it's charged. And this immediate classification dictates not just the urgency of the response, but the very chain of evidence that begins right there with their initial questioning. They also have to grasp corpus delicti Latin for the body of crime. Basically, all the elements of a specific crime, as laid out in the statute, that have to be proven. And absolutely critical to their work is understanding probable cause. Do the facts they're gathering suggest a crime may have occurred? Their specific lines of questioning during a call were designed to help establish this.
And evidence. You mentioned the chain of evidence. Are they involved beyond just taking the initial report?
Oh, yes. They are often the very first link in the chain of evidence. Sometimes they'll even advise callers on crucial evidence preservation. Don't touch that. Leave things as they are. Furthermore, they navigate this really delicate balance of confidentiality with communications information. They have to understand the need to know versus the right to know, especially when officer or citizen safety is on the line. And they also understand what constitutes public information that can be released under laws like the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, or the California Public Records Act.
That definitely brings up questions of liability then.
Correct. They learn about civil liability, criminal negligence, understanding the potential legal blowback if proper procedures aren't followed. They get familiar with statutory law, that's written law from legislative bodies, and case law, which is built on prior judicial decisions. And crucially, they understand the evidentiary value of all communications data. Every recorded call, every radio transmission, every computer message is subject to subpoena. They might even end up in court testifying about a recorded confession they took over the phone.
It's just fascinating how every single detail they handle, every word spoken or typed, could become part of a formal legal proceeding. What about this concept of spirit versus letter of the law? How does that play out?
That's a really important distinction, especially in systems like California's. The legal system there is directed more towards the spirit of the law. What was the legislature intending rather than just the strict letter, the literal meaning of the words? Dispatchers have to grasp that nuance. They also differentiate between criminal intent, someone meaning to commit a crime, and criminal negligence, which is more about the failure to exercise ordinary care. Understanding that difference has huge implications for the call and the response.
Okay, so beyond all the legal and technical stuff, there's this huge human element of communication. It seems like the ability to communicate effectively, especially under intense pressure, would be absolutely paramount.
It is truly foundational. Absolutely. Their responsibilities demand seamless communication with this incredibly wide array of individuals. Co-workers, the units in the field, other agencies they coordinate with, and of course, the public calling in. And developing positive, clear communication skills isn't just about, doing the job well. It's tied directly to career satisfaction, building better working relationships, reducing their own stress levels, and even mitigating personal and professional liability. Good communication protects everyone.
So it's not just what they say, but how they say it, and maybe even more importantly, how they listen.
Exactly. They delve deep into the intricate elements of the communication process. The sender, the receiver, verbal cues, nonverbal sources like tone of voice, the message itself, noise, which just means distractions, filters people listen through, feedback, and the critical context of the communication. Is the person angry, frustrated, terrified? They focus intensely on the content, yes, but also those nonverbal cues, a power of their own voice. Professional conduct is key. Being civil, courteous, controlling their voice tone, choosing words carefully, even being aware of their body language if they're visible, all while dealing with immense work-related stress.
And what about creating a positive environment within the dispatch center? That sounds challenging in such a high-stress job.
Yeah, it's crucial. They learn to actively promote an environment that's free of discrimination and harassment. This means addressing emotional and psychological issues constructively, avoiding inappropriate verbal behavior like profanity or gossip, fostering tolerance, genuinely valuing diversity, understanding different perspectives, and fundamentally treating everyone with respect. It's about building a cohesive team that can function effectively under extreme pressure.
That makes perfect sense. But what about those really, really tough calls? When people are highly emotional, maybe even abusive, how do they handle that level of human distress and anger?
This is where their training really comes into its own. They learn about various communication behaviors and styles, how to be flexible, attentive, precise, but also specifically how to deal with abusive or uncooperative individuals. They have explicit strategies for deflecting verbal abuse, things like verbal deflection techniques, refocusing the caller, redirecting the conversation. And they're trained to recognize abusive triggers to try and de-escalate situations before they explode.
I have to imagine active listening is just, well, vital in those moments.
Oh, active listening is defined as a core concept. Absolutely vital. And they're taught specific techniques for it. This includes asking critical questions, often using the 5 Ws, who, what, when, where, why, to get precise, actionable information. It's about maintaining control of the conversation, eliciting cooperation even from difficult callers, and reflecting confidence, empathy, and concern back to the person on the line. They also learn to identify common listening obstacles in themselves and others. Things like one-upmanship, just waiting for your turn to talk instead of hearing, offering unsolicited advice, jumping to conclusions, interrupting, or being judgmental. And they rigorously address the concept of disclosure, what information they can share, what they cannot share, and what their mandatory reporting requirements are.
This whole operation sounds incredibly reliant on technology and really precise procedures. What kind of tools and protocols are they mastering to manage all of this?
Well, their training covers really extensive telephone technology and procedures. And this isn't just about answering the phone. It includes sophisticated interview techniques designed to obtain critical information from victims, witnesses, or even other agencies. It's about effectively managing the flow of a call, asking those crucial, targeted questions we talked about. And they learn specific techniques for calming a caller who's in crisis, using calm, direct instructions, diffusion tactics, sometimes strategic silence, offering reassurance, and again, that active listening.
They must deal with such an incredible variety of callers, too, each one presenting unique challenges.
Indeed. I mean, the range is huge. They're trained to receive and handle callers who might be pranksters or nuisances, those who are communication impaired, maybe using devices like TDD-TTY, which is a telecommunications device for the deaf teletypewriter, or using video relay or California relay services. They handle non-English-speaking callers, witnesses, victims, sometimes even suspects calling in, anonymous callers, confidential informants, or people who are just abrasive, terrified, hysterical, hurried, maybe politically demanding under the influence of drugs or alcohol, very young or very old, rambling, heavily accented, hostile, mentally incapacitated, or even actively suicidal. And here's a really critical skill. They even learn to detect and interpret background voices and noises, arguments, screaming, gunshots, breaking glass. Those sounds can provide vital clues about what's really happening.
Wow. What happens when, say, multiple calls start flooding in for the exact same incident, like a major accident?
Right, that happens all the time. They have to process those duplicate calls really efficiently, quickly determine if it's related to an incident already in progress. And then they need to question those callers for any additional updated information. Maybe someone saw something slightly different. They obtain pertinent information using primary and secondary questions tailored for all kinds of incidents. Crime, traffic, medical, fire, hazardous materials spills, you name it. They also route calls to allied agencies when needed and relay all that incident information to the radio dispatchers in a timely, logical way, always prioritizing the most critical info for that initial dispatch. Get help moving first, then fill in details.
And the 911 system itself, it's far more complex under the hood than most people realize, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You dial 911, and this whole complex web of technology just springs into action. Dispatchers have to master systems like automatic number identification ANI, which gives them the phone number, and automatic location identification ALI, which pinpoints the location. But the real insight isn't just that they get the info, it's how they leverage it, often when a caller is too distraught, too injured, or maybe unable to even speak to state their address. Their ability to cross-reference multiple data points in mere seconds is often what saves lives before a single word is spoken by the caller. They understand the whole public safety answering point, or PSP, structure primary, secondary, alternate PSAPs, which dictates how calls get routed and answered depending on location and system status. They also learn about things like completing ALI routing sheets, using a master street address guide, the MAG, and understanding emergency service numbers, ESNs. It's all geared toward ensuring help gets to the precise location fast.
What about all the newer stuff? Wireless 911 calls, texting 911, other emerging technologies. How have those changed the game?
Yeah, the training definitely covers all of that. Cellular phones, voice over internet protocol calls VoIP, texting to 911, even video calls in some areas, and telematics systems. Telematics, like the automatic crash notification systems in many modern cars. They also learn about other N11 systems like 311 for non-emergencies or 511 for traffic info, so they know when to appropriately route callers to those services instead of tying up 911 lines. And beyond the phone systems, they utilize sophisticated tools like automated mapping systems, TTY equipment for the hearing impaired, mass notification systems like reverse 911 for community alerts, voice-activated alarms, and these intelligent workstations that help streamline everything they do.
Okay, let's talk about the radio. That must be their constant lifeline to the units out in the field. How do they master that essential communication channel?
It absolutely is their lifeline. They are constantly monitoring, documenting, and responding to radio transmissions from field personnel and other public services. Often, this is tightly integrated with computer aided dispatch or CAD systems.
Hmm.
That's sort of their central nervous system for incident management.
Hmm.
And also the mobile data terminals, the MDTs or MDCs, in the field units, which allow for seamless digital communication back and forth. They're managing all the unit traffic, doing status checks, tracking locations, ensuring unwavering accuracy and timeliness. Everything has to be precise. They broadcast critical officer safety information, coordinate mutual aid responses, all while understanding geographic considerations, response times, who's available for backup, agency policies, and when to deploy specialized units like K9 or SWAT.
And the actual way they speak over the radio, that specific cadence and language must be critical for clarity, especially when things get chaotic.
Oh, it is absolutely critical. The public safety dispatcher has to be understood clearly by field units, first time, every time, no room for error. They use appropriate, department-approved radio language. They use the phonetic alphabet, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, constantly to clarify names and locations. And they speak in a calm, clear voice that consistently portrays confidence, conviction, and competence, even if things are falling apart on the other end of the call they just took. They're constantly managing and prioritizing that radio traffic, and they understand instinctively when to use clear text, plain English, versus agency-specific radio codes to convey urgency and essential details efficiently.
What happens when a truly high-stress, dangerous situation unfolds, like a police pursuit or something similar?
Right. In those situations, they immediately broadcast crucial information. Details on felony warrants, stolen vehicles, if weapons are involved, medical and fire incident updates, any known history about the premises involved, and any other supplemental details coming in. They know precisely when to declare emergency traffic. That essentially means they clear the air, taking control of the radio channel so only the most critical transmissions related to that incident get through. Think foot pursuits, vehicle pursuits, high-risk vehicle stops. Officer safety is absolutely paramount. It's covered by strict protocols. Things like regular officer roll calls or status checks, radio and MDT emergency alarms or panic buttons, real-time weapon information updates, tracking the number of units responding, and constantly monitoring the quality and clarity of all radio traffic. They also have to know about FCC regulations governing the radio systems, like proper station identification and the strict requirement for professional mission-critical transmissions only. It truly is a nonstop high-intensity environment where every single word counts.
Okay, let's pivot slightly and talk about specific types of incidents dispatchers handle that require really specialized knowledge. What kind of expertise do they need for, say, missing persons cases?
Missing persons cases require a really specific skill set and knowledge base. They need a solid working knowledge of the laws governing missing person reports, both state, like California statutes, and federal laws. And they have to understand the various types of missing persons. There are different categories. At-risk individuals may be underage, someone with urgent medical needs or mental impairment. Then there are involuntary missing persons, could be an elder or dependent adult who's vulnerable, someone lost after a catastrophe, someone lost in the wilderness, or tragically stranger abductions. They also deal with parental or family abductions and runaways. Each requires a different approach.
And what are their immediate responsibilities during that kind of critical emotional call?
Well, first off, critical call taking in these cases involves profound empathy and compassion. You're talking to someone in possibly the worst moment of their life. While showing that empathy, they have to gather very specific, often intimate information. The missing person's name, age, detailed description, family environment, any suspicious circumstances surrounding the disappearance, their mental or medical condition, the weather conditions at the time they went missing, and crucially, the length of time they've been gone. They classify the situation rapidly based on risk factors, issue be on the lookout, or BLO information to field units, and know the precise actions required once, hopefully, the person is located. They also utilize vital resources like Amber Alerts for child abductions, the a child is missing, or AKIM alert system trach alerts, and specialized adult child tracking systems like Project Lifesaver for individuals prone to wandering.
Moving to another incredibly challenging type of call, domestic violence. That must be tough for everyone involved.
Absolutely. It's one of the most dangerous calls for both the victim and the responding officers, and very difficult for the dispatcher. They gain a crucial understanding of domestic violence laws, specific penal codes, and legal definitions like what constitutes abuse, who qualifies as a cohabitant, and how to identify the dominant aggressor in a situation, which isn't always obvious. And this isn't just abstract legal knowledge. It directly shapes how they interview callers to get the most accurate picture, ensuring the correct, potentially life-saving response is initiated, even if the victim is initially reluctant to press charges or cooperate fully. The dispatcher's role involves careful, proper questioning, assessing any emergency medical needs, considering staging considerations for officer safety. Is there a history at this address? Are weapons potentially involved? What's the suspect description? And accurately relaying any impulse statements or utterances made by the caller, which can be key evidence. They ensure law enforcement response is dispatched swiftly and appropriately, respecting the victim's situation, but prioritizing safety.
What about the broader community context? Things like community policing initiatives. How do dispatchers fit into that?
That's a great question. They learn about community policing, its history, its definition as a philosophy, promoting police and community partnerships working together to solve problems. They learn about its benefits in reducing crime and, just as importantly, reducing the fear of crime. The dispatcher's role here can be really significant. They're often the first to notice patterns or trends emerging in neighborhoods, maybe a sudden spike in burglaries in one area or ongoing noise complaints. They can communicate these potential problems, acting as sort of an early warning system for patrol units and community policing officers. They also delve deeply into cultural diversity, understanding how different cultures might perceive law enforcement and how law enforcement might perceive different cultures, and developing strategies for effective cross-cultural communication, especially over the phone where all those nonverbal cues are completely absent.
That brings up another critical point. How do they handle calls that might involve hate crimes or perhaps gang activity?
That requires specific training, too. They are trained to clearly distinguish between a hate crime, which has a legal definition, usually a crime motivated by bias against a protected characteristic, and a hate incident, which might be offensive or hurtful but doesn't necessarily cross the threshold into a crime. They learn their responsibility in recognizing when internal or external notifications are needed, maybe to specialized detectives or community liaisons, and they're made aware of the legal rights and remedies available for victims of hate crimes. For gang awareness, they study the legal definition of criminal gangs, common methods of gang member identification, typical characteristics, current crime trends associated with local gangs, and the tracking databases law enforcement uses. Their role involves proper questioning on these calls. Are there specific colors, signs, or phrases being used? And relaying all salient information to the responding field personnel to significantly enhance officer safety when dealing with potentially volatile gang-related calls.
And calls involving vulnerable populations like children or the elderly, these must require a particular kind of sensitivity and knowledge.
Definitely. They receive a comprehensive overview of child abuse statistics, the devastating long-term effects, the different types like neglect, sexual abuse, physical, emotional abuse, along with all the related laws and reporting requirements. Similarly, they cover elder and dependent adult abuse. This includes physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and something called fiduciary abuse, financial exploitation again, covering the related laws and associated crimes. Crucially, they know the specific resources available to these victims, like Child Protective Services, CPS, and Adult Protective Services, APS, agencies. Their role is vital in that initial call screening, making the mandatory notifications, identifying helpful resources for the caller or victim, and meticulously documenting everything.
It really sounds like these dispatchers are operating at the very heart of public safety, especially during major events. What's their role in critical incidents like a natural disaster or a major emergency?
You phrased that perfectly. They are at the heart of it. What's fascinating here is how absolutely central their function becomes during large-scale events. They learn detailed procedures specifically for critical incidents, whether it's natural disasters like earthquakes or floods, or intentional acts like active shooter events or terrorist threats. They have immediate access to critical resource materials, things like emergency call-out lists for specialized personnel, disaster preparedness manuals for their specific area, and crucial references like the Department of Transportation's Hazmat Emergency Response Guidebook for chemical spills or leaks. Their role during these chaotic events includes obtaining and rapidly disseminating critical, verified information, carefully screening the flood of incoming calls for any new actionable details, advising citizens on immediate protective actions like shelter in place during a chemical spill, and constantly dispatching, deploying, and meticulously tracking all responding units and resources. They have to maintain incredible flexibility and continually review and reassess the incoming information as the situation evolves minute by minute.
So they're completely integral to large-scale responses, like mutual aid as well, coordinating between different agencies.
Absolutely. They have a deep understanding of mutual aid, which is essentially the voluntary sharing of personnel and resources when one agency's own capabilities are overwhelmed. They learn the whole law enforcement mutual aid ladder or framework, how requests escalate from city police to the county sheriff, potentially to regional task forces, and even up to state-level resources. And they understand the coordination required with other critical public service departments, especially fire and emergency medical services. During a major incident, the dispatch center often becomes the central command and control hub, coordinating all these different players.
Given the relentless intensity of this job, the constant exposure to trauma, secondhand or sometimes directly over the phone, it must take a significant toll personally. How does their training address their own wellness?
That's a profoundly important question, and thankfully, it's something that's getting much more attention now than it used to. The curriculum actually includes a full learning domain dedicated specifically to wellness management. They learn about stress, the definition, maybe citing experts like Hans Selye, who called it the non-specific response of the body to any demand placed upon it. They learn to recognize its various symptoms in themselves and their colleagues. The physiological responses like chronic fatigue or headaches, the cognitive impacts like difficulty concentrating or making decisions, and the emotional responses like irritability, anxiety, or emotional numbing.
And what are the specific, unique sources of this stress for a dispatcher? It seems like it comes from all directions.
It really does. They are varied and just pervasive. There's stress from personal and family life just like anyone else. But then layer on top the challenging, often rotating work schedules, nights, weekends, holidays. There's the constant struggle of balancing family life with this demanding job. There's the intense client interactions dealing with people in crisis every single day. Peer interactions within a high-stress environment can be tough, too. The ongoing demands of training and staying current add pressure. And the workplace environment itself, the noise, the urgency, the stakes, is inherently stressful. The training addresses both the short-term impacts and, crucially, the long-term cumulative effects of this chronic stress. This includes implications for career survival. Burnout is a real risk, and the potential development of conditions like post-traumatic stress, PTS, or even full post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, from repeated exposure to traumatic events.
So how does the training actually prepare them to cope with all that? How do they build resilience?
Well, they're taught a range of practical techniques to promote wellness. This often focuses on proactive, holistic lifestyle choices, things like the importance of physical fitness, healthy nutrition, getting enough sleep, which is tough with shift work. But crucially, they are made aware of and strongly encouraged to utilize the support resources available to them. Things like peer support programs where they can talk to colleagues who truly understand, confidential counseling services, employee assistance programs, or EAPs, critical incident stress debriefing teams, CISD or CISM, that come in after particularly harrowing events, and sometimes law enforcement chaplaincy services. This explicit recognition of the immense cognitive and emotional load of the job and the active provision of tools and resources to manage it is absolutely vital for their long-term health and effectiveness.
What an incredible deep dive this has been, really. From navigating these complex legal landscapes to mastering communication with all sorts of people under extreme pressure, and even understanding and managing their own mental and physical well-being. The role of a public safety dispatcher is truly a high-stakes, incredibly multifaceted calling.
Yeah, we've really seen how they are so much more than just, a voice on the phone. They truly are those first responders equipped with just an astonishing breadth of knowledge and skills. Their training emphasizes not just rote learning, but experiential learning, critical thinking, continuous professional development. It's all designed to build that incredible resilience needed to perform effectively in environments where every single second, every detail truly counts.
So, what does this all mean for you listening? Maybe the next time you hear about a 911 call, or heaven forbid, have to make one, what new layer of appreciation will you have for that calm, skilled voice on the other end? Think about it. They're orchestrating an entire complex system, often starting from just a single critical call. Imagine that invisible ballet of technology, law, procedure, and intense human connection happening just behind the scenes, all coordinated by that one person. It's really something to think about.